Yo, I have a very comprehensive tutorial for you today regarding drums. If you have superior drummer, you have addictive drums, or you have breakbeats, I'm going to show you some methods that I've learned from professionals like Disprove, Copycat, Scope, Frequent, not personally, but through videos that I've watched to find and explore my own technique about how I distort and use acoustic drums and make them sound more like electronic. So if you're into drum and bass, if you're into Neuro, if you're into halftime music, then this would be the tutorial for you. The number one thing that I want to point out in this is I'm using several different sources of sounds. So I have some instances of addictive drums, I have some instances of superior drummer 2 and 3, and then I also have a regular breakbeat. And you're going to see how those characteristics are different, but also how you can achieve a similar result using the techniques of EQ, distortion, compression, and multi-band dynamics, or a multi-band compressor as well, which is the same as compression, but let's just treat it like it's something different because I use it in a different way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play through these samples, and if this is something that you're interested in or you like the way that these sound, then continue to stick around. Here we go. So yeah, these were all made using the same types of processing. They're not all the same exact parameters and whatnot. I didn't just copy paste, but using as aforementioned above, or using the ideologies, the arithmetic from as previous stated, then you can achieve some of these results and get some really cool sounding things. Now, whether or not these are useful to you is a different story. For me, I like the way that these drums sound, and I've used this same technique in a lot of my own personal songs. If you look at IED, Nightmares, and then my latest release, Existentialism. So first up, let's go ahead and take a look at Superior Drummer. Now, I'm not going to show you the nitty-gritty of these because they're actually unimportant. What you need to know is that on your main kick mic, your main snare mic, your overheads, and your output, they're all doing the same thing. I'm using some EQ, I'm using some distortion, I'm transient shaping, basically taking out the sustain of these hits to make the sounds more dry. This has more distortion, and then I'm finishing up with the multi-band EQ. On the snare, it's pretty much the same thing, EQ, tape simulation, transient master, multi-band, blah blah blah. Doing the same thing for the overheads and the same thing for the master output. Now if you're using Superior Drummer 3 in particular, it's pretty cool because you can actually shorten the sustain of particular mics. In this case, I've done it on the ambience. It's kind of neat because I wish that there was like an on and off thing right there. That way I can just A-B that. But as you can tell, I've shortened the sustain for the ambience, which is basically the room. And what that does is it allows me to have my drums sounding super dry, because that's what you want to start with initially. So all the other effects outside of the box are turned off. Let's go ahead and listen to this super quick about what kind of sound you're getting versus what you can turn it into if you're using Superior Drummer. And you can like way blow this out of proportion, and you can go in and individually use these mics and do crazy stuff and whatnot. But this was just kind of to shape the tone, if that makes sense. Here's the kick. Here's the snare. Overheads. Master output. You know, if you're using something like addictive drums, you're going to have all of these effects in a chain. And even though you can't reorder them like you can in Superior Drummer 3, you can still use them to your advantage to really shape those things. So one particular shout out that I want you guys to be aware of is a transient master, really bumping up that attack and then turning down the sustain, regardless of if you're using it like as an effect chain within addictive drums or Superior Drummer, or you're using like Native Instruments transient shaper or something. That really helps a lot. And if you use like a sustain and you turn that up on a dry snare with a little bit of room, then it will kind of make it sound like it's blowing up, because you'll have your transient, it will get quiet, and then it will sound like it's like vacuum sucking. But anyways, that's not the point of this video. Alright, so let's start to look at the actual effects chains that we have. and you'll start to see where things really come alive. First up, I have some very basic EQ where I'm taking out the super lows and then giving a little bit of presence around 2000K. Depending on what you're using and your drum kits and whatnot, this is going to be totally subjective, and this isn't even a really big boost. I just thought that it sounded a little bit better with that tiny boost, and then cleaning that up a little bit. So the next one that we have is FabFilter's Pro Multiband, which is doing a lot. If you make a 3-band EQ and then you just turn them all up, then you basically get smacks. There's more that you can do, like with these kinds of controls and whatnot within the actual parameters of this, but this sounds pretty good on its own, and I don't really feel like I need to mess with the threshold. This is a creative choice as opposed to like a mixing thing, you know, so it's different. I recommend that you just mess around with the tools and whatnot, or you could just, you know, do like a and turn the range up all the way. Don't do that. That's fine, whatever. All right, moving on. This is just kind of gating the drums a little bit. As you add more distortion and whatnot, you're going to notice that some of the tails might start to become longer. So you want to be mindful of keeping control of preserving the transient, but also paying attention to how long that tail is to keep it short and punchy. Because in essence, like if you have something that has a good transient and isn't too long, or it doesn't have too much sustain, then it can be used as a form of percussion, whether or not it be a kick or snare. And this is just controlling that a little bit. A disclaimer, I usually add the CLA drums at the end of doing the rest of this stuff, but this is where I fit it in. So next up we have some saturation from Saturn, which is actually also doing some transient shaping and some very, very small distortion. I don't even think that you can tell, to be honest. I just end up throwing a Saturn on like everything. Next up, we have an instance of trash, which is also another form of distortion. If you're using a bunch of combinations of distortions, then be subtle with it, because you'll notice that the way that you shape is going to be much different. You're going to get very different characteristics. So this is barely doing anything with about a 2 decibel drive, 2.0 drive. I don't even know if that's a decibel or not, but it's just tape saturating. Punching you in the face now, the face now, the face now, the face now. Here's some surgical EQ that's just taking out some peaks. The snare is coming out pretty harshly, so I'm kind of taking that out, cutting everything above 15K, cutting everything out below 40 hertz, and then this is like a cymbal or something that's just kind of peaking out. So to tone that, I am using a little bit of OTT. And then finally just limiting it a little bit with the FabFilter Pro L. In essence, that same process that I just showed you of shaping it with an EQ, you can pull it out, or I'm using multiband in this case as a means of distortion and like overdriving it or doing something. It's blowing the drums up, that's what I call it. Shaping it, saturation, distortion, shaping it, over compressing it basically, and then making sure that it's not peaking with a limiter. You can achieve the sounds from all of these. Now, depending on your sound source as well, like that's something that you'll have to pay attention to. This is a drum break from BHK. This is a Rex file. If I drag this out, it's already out here, you can see that the transients are way smaller. The drums themselves aren't really sounding that great. I think that this would be better used as a shuffle. If this is all you have, you know, let's say you go on the internet and you download some breaks or something, you can still get more out of it. In this particular case of this breakbeat, this is where I might actually layer. I don't know, I don't like the tones of it, but you can still blow it up. So this might be good for like some cuts or something where like you have it as a transition and you do some stuff. It's not to say that it's not useful, it's just I wouldn't use these drums as like my main focus of the track, whereas these seem a little bit more usable. At the end of the day, understanding compression, understanding distortion and whatnot, and then learning how to stack them in such a way that isn't too overbearing, but just a little bit, will allow you to achieve results like this. That's pretty much it. I guess in regards, I'll say this much: if you're looking or you're shopping around for like a live acoustic drum program or VST plugin. Of course, the best deal that you're going to get is Superior Drummer 3 because it has 230 gigs of sounds, and you can also stack and reorder and, you know, do all those things to your effects. But in my history and all the songs previously to Superior Drummer 3, I've used Addictive Drums, and it's been fantastic, and it's a really easy way to get sounds out of the box quickly. And if for whatever reason you end up getting Superior Drummer 2 from way back when, or you already have it, then you can still get that stuff. It just requires a little bit more legwork. As a recap, make the drums dry for now. You can reintroduce room and stuff later. You're doing a lot of distortion and stuff, make them as dry as you can. Shorten the transients, distort them and compress them, and then EQ them out to try to get them flat, and then kind of like repeat the process until you, well, end up with a result like this. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully this recording wasn't terrible. I don't have a mic stand, so I'm like emceeing this, but yeah. Thank you guys for watching this, and happy producing.